City Planning Commission meeting for October 22nd, 2020. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda today, there are speaker request forms along the table on the left wall. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff seated on the left of the dais. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Items 1 through 7 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision with the exception of the following item. Item 3, 20PD029. The Rapid City Planning Commission's action on this item is final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Department of Community Development by close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 7 that staff would like removed for separate consideration? Any items 1 through 7 that any planning commissioner would like removed? And are there any items 1 through 7 that any audience member would like removed for separate consideration? Seeing that there aren't any, the chair would then entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 7 in accordance with staff's recommendation. All right, Haven made the motion, and Eric Heikes seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is the final report of the 6th Street study. You have seen in the past the draft report of the 6th and Omaha Crossing Feasibility Study and the 6th Street Corridor Study draft report. This final report brings the two together into one final report. So the reason behind this is downtown is growing and changing, and we want to make sure that the 6th Street Corridor is a safe and vibrant connection between downtown, Memorial Park, and the new Civic Center construction, the Monument Arena. So as part of this study, we decided to do a lot of community and stakeholder engagement. So we thought that getting the public's input on this is really, really critical since most people use this as their main connection through downtown. So we had a couple different public meetings. As you can see up on the board here, we've got some maps that we had laid out. People could draw on them, put sticky notes. We had a lot of good public engagement that way. So we had 2 public meetings that were held like that, and then we were scheduled to have a 3rd public meeting, and then the pandemic hit. So we had to shift gears a little bit and switch to an online meeting format. So we were able to do an online commenting map, and we also put out an online survey that we were able to get out to the general public, and also were able to get out to the business owners and business people along the 6th Street corridor and throughout downtown. So as part of that outreach, both myself and our consultant team went out and talked to a lot of the different business owners and property owners up and down the 6th Street corridor and a few blocks adjacent. Got a lot of good face-to-face interaction. We're able to let them know about the survey and get some good responses that way. So we had over 500 responses to our online survey, which is really, really shocking. That's one of the greatest responses we've ever had as far as public input goes to any of our projects that we've done. And one of the things we asked was, how does this overall concept rate with how you envision 6th Street in a scale of 1 to 10? And our average rating was about a 7 out of 10, and the majority of the responses were in the 6 to 9 range. So we actually think we did pretty good on meeting the public's expectations. So the first part of the study that we talked about is the 6th and Omaha Crossing Feasibility Study. And the purpose of this was to determine, can we make a grade-separated crossing at 6th and Omaha to allow pedestrians and bicyclists unimpeded access between downtown and Memorial Park and separate them from the flow of traffic. And the need for this is really generated by the fact that this crossing has been designated as a temporary crossing by the South Dakota Department of Transportation. So we have a contract with SDDOT that says once traffic on Omaha and 5th Street gets bad enough that there are improvements to the 5th Street intersection back up through this pedestrian crossing would have to be removed at the city's expense. In that case, we would have the only way to get between downtown and Memorial Park and the Civic Center would be at those signalized crossings at 5th Street and at Mount Rushmore Road, which are two of the busiest intersections in town. So now you're adding in a bunch of bicycle and pedestrian traffic with all those various turning movements located at those intersections will decrease safety and will make it harder for those intersections to operate at an acceptable level of service. So taking a look at the grade-separated crossing, there were three components that were assessed. The first is how does it affect the bicycle and pedestrian network? The second is does it work with our traffic operations? And the third is how does it affect our transit system since the Milo Barber Transportation Center is located immediately adjacent to that 6th and Omaha intersection. And so the primary outcomes say that, well, it's actually an enhancement to our bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. Like I said, it would allow bikes and peds to proceed unimposed from downtown to the Civic Center and back. There would be no conflicts with 6 lanes of vehicular traffic. It would work out really well for our bikes and peds. As far as traffic operations, removing the 6th and Omaha Street intersection from our traffic system would not have real degradation in our traffic flow, cause a little bit of rerouting through downtown, maybe add just a little bit of travel time on various movements, but overall it works very well with our overall traffic patterns. And as far as transit goes, it only has a negative effect on one route, and that would be the Lincoln North route. And while it doesn't have a negative effect on the overall operations, the route would still enter and leave the facility at the same time. It does require a little rerouting getting in and out of the parking lot, which then changes the times that it hits certain stops. So there would have to be some reworking of the brochures and the signage and things like that on the Lincoln route. Again, a minor impact, but overall it really functions well with our transit. So that's the corridor feasibility study. So the crossing feasibility study. So that shows that making a grade-separated crossing at 6th and Omaha is actually feasible. So the next part was our corridor plan, and that again is to create a cohesive vision for 6th Street, tying everything together from the Performing Arts Center and Rapid City High School on the south, through downtown, across Omaha Street, through Memorial Park, and tying into the Monument Civic Center Arena. So we took a look at various goals here, and those are safety. We want to keep safe movements for everybody. Accessibility, make sure that everybody can use this. Bikes, peds, transit vehicles, motor vehicles, all that, it's accessible to all users. And really keep a connection between all these major attractions through downtown. Again, there's also Main Street Square, and there's the bus depot and City Hall. All that's located along this corridor. And we want a unified identity and a character. Is there something to tie this all together? As you are in Memorial Park in the north end of downtown, there's a lot going on there. As you move farther south to the Performing Arts Center, it has a little different feel. There's not as much art and sculpture and landscaping, and it's just kind of a different feel of the corridor. So we wanted to try to tie that all together. So out of that came a lot of recommendations from that survey, again, which we had over 500 responses. So we asked people to rank what they think the highest priority transportation elements are. And the top two were better sidewalks and better crosswalks. So people want to be able to use this as a pedestrian and have a safer feel. As far as community amenities, the top three ranked were enhanced lighting. Again, that's more of a safety issue. People want to feel safe when walking around in the evening. They wanted more landscaping to make it more attractive, and looking at some more shopping and dining options. So there's more activities to do along the corridor as well, and keep that feel going up and down the whole corridor. So as part of this, we took a look at the crossing itself, and two different concepts were just put out. These are not the only concepts that are out there. These were just two we put out as examples. So as you see on the top left, this is called the park cover concept, whereby Omaha Street would be slightly lowered, 6th Street would be slightly raised, and basically a pedestrian bridge that would be an extension of Memorial Park would be built over. So pedestrians would basically go at grade up and over a little arch and then into Memorial Park. This is a very popular concept these days. We've seen it in a lot of other communities. Tulsa, Oklahoma has the Gathering Place. Dallas, Texas has Clyde Warren Park. And they use this park cover concept to connect two areas over a busy roadway. And then the second one on the upper right is what's called a ribbon walkway. And this one actually takes off from ground level and goes up and over Omaha Street, kind of a winding route, and ties back into the promenade. And in the survey response, nearly 2/3 of our respondents preferred the park cover concept over the ribbon walkway concept. We also took a look at other elements in the corridor for recommendations, again, lighting and crosswalks, more art, more bike and pedestrian facilities, some more plazas and parklets, maybe a little more public space up and down, things we could do to get people to gather places, and then improvements to Memorial Park as well. Oops, wrong way, sorry about that. So looking at the corridor concept, we broke it into segments. So the top segment is from Columbus to Kansas City, then from Kansas City through the core of downtown to Main Street, and then Main to Omaha, including the park cover concept, and a lot of the similar recommendations, including lighting and crosswalks, landscaping, things like that. Not shown in this executive summary, but shown in the corridor study were the actual improvements to the Promenade of Memorial Park. Again, enhanced lighting, more planting, more landscaping, more art projects, things like that. Again, trying to make this a cohesive corridor with a lot more activity along it. So the next steps, once this is done, we will take a look at funding sources. How can we get this funded? Obviously, this is a big project. There's a lot of construction involved, and there's also a lot of engineering involved. You know, if we do any sort of grade separation, including possibly lowering Omaha Street, how will that work with drainage? As we know, it's kind of in a low spot and close to the creek. Is that the best idea? Is it going up and over? Those are all things that will be done in the engineering feasibility study. So that's what we're going to do is we'll take a look at different funding sources, possibly some federal grants to be able to do some sort of engineering and build project all in one, and then move forward with that. And we'll also look at some public-private partnerships in order to maybe get some of these amenities, including the art and the landscaping and streetscapes and things like that. Again, this is the final report. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Kip. I'll just chime in off the bat. The virtual meeting that you held,
yes.
I found it was very helpful for, I think it's a great way in the future, pandemic or not, to solicit input from folks that can't make the in-person times. And for me, it worked really well. So I would just encourage you to keep that on your toolbox.
Thank you. That has been something we've been working towards in the past already with virtual public involvement. It's a new push from Federal Highway Administration to try to bring the information to people where they are instead of making people come to you. So it's something we've been planning on doing, and the pandemic just kind of pushed the fast forward button on that and made us do it a little quicker than we were anticipating. And we've done it with a couple projects now with mixed results. Again, this one had great response. Our Metropolitan Transportation Plan didn't get quite as much response, but that's really a very broad study with a lot of information going on. This one's a lot more focused and a lot more local, so I think that allowed people to really kind of drill down into what was important to them instead of looking at a big picture of the whole area and 25 years out. This is a very small area that a lot of people are very familiar with, so people are really interested in, were able to give us a lot of great feedback.
Eric Heikus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is excellent work, Kip.
Thank you.
It's comprehensive, context sensitive, and I think your programming and public outreach looks like it's well done, well executed. I think this is a missing puzzle piece for Rapid City, personally, as a citizen. I used to live downtown, and we used to go to Rush games really often, and that was always a dilemma of that separation on Omaha. That was always an issue with, getting across. And I think there's a huge amount of a commerce that follows it as well. I mean, you dine and shop downtown and then go to the Civic Center or stay downtown. I think that's a link. That the pedestrian-driven aspect of that, I think, almost outweighs the vehicular sometimes in the way that commerce could change across Omaha there. So those are my opinions.
Thank you. So with the construction of the new arena, there's not any additional parking. So basically the Civic Center is counting on people to be able to use some of this downtown business parking in the evening when it's underutilized and be able to make that connection. And right now, crossing 6 lanes of vehicular traffic, it's not only uncomfortable for pedestrians, but it also impedes the flow of traffic on Omaha Street. So DOT is in favor of this because it gets rid of one more signal on their system, which makes it harder to coordinate. And then you've got traffic backing up from the 5th Street intersection through this intersection on occasion. And people, or what happens is people push the button, they're waiting, they get a gap in traffic, they just go across, then the pedestrian signal changes, traffic stops for nobody. So we're concerned that over time, when that keeps happening to people, they tend to ignore the signal then, and then you'll see people ignoring the signal and more pedestrians being hit. There's not a terrible safety problem right now, but we have had some vehicle pedestrian collisions at this crossing in the past, and we're trying to eliminate those in the future.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kip, that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And some of the questions I had, you've already covered. But I do have a question that, I know this is speculative because it's just, who knows what the economy is going to do. But you've dealt with a lot of grants and highway construction things. What kind of timeline do you see this going forward as far as whether you're hiring an engineer to do that part of it or doing the whole piece as you mentioned before? You have any idea?
Well, we're anticipating getting started by the end of the year working with DOT, because this will have to be a joint application, obviously, since Omaha Street is also a state highway. So we're anticipating hopefully getting this in for next year and the next round of build grant applications. If not next year, then the year after for sure is something we're looking at. So then once we get, that's a competitive grant program, so we have no guarantee that we would receive it. However, it's really focused on innovative and new ideas, and we feel this is a really strong candidate because there's nothing like this in the whole area or in the state. So we think it's got a pretty good chance of maybe getting an award. So once we get that, then we'd start looking at the process. So I think we're at minimum 4 or 5 years out before any construction would happen. But again, that's all speculative. But this is really the first step in a long process. So we need to make sure that this would work, first of all, before we move any farther, before we get into the real serious engineering questions and things like that. So from a planning perspective and a really high level perspective, yes, this is doable. And now we move on to the next steps.
Good. That makes me feel a little bit better. I didn't want it to be one of those road over the hill things that just sit there for a while. So thanks.
That's not our intent, no.
Yeah.
Kelly?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Karen touched on my question. Well put together study. Kudos to the city and the team that was involved in this. It's really well done. I think it's long overdue and needed for pedestrians, for commerce, for the city at large. And I moved back here in 2012, and this was a subject to discussion in the media back then, and there were a lot of studies done. So my question was similar. I know these things take planning revisions, budgeting, et cetera. So is the completion or start date tied into the Civic Center project at all, or you just, do you have a benchmark of when you'd like to get this thing initiated?
No, we want to just get moving as soon as possible, and we don't know exactly when this pedestrian crossing could go away. Again, that's dependent on the increase in traffic flow, but we know that the area is growing, and so as the area grows, traffic increases. And again, this is our main east-west corridor through the community, and Fifth Street is our main north-south corridor through the community. So that intersection is just going to become busier over time.
Right.
As that intersection keeps getting busier, those turn lanes need to be extended and things like that. And so when that comes back and blocks this 6th and Omaha pedestrian crossing, that's when that crossing has to be removed. So we want to be ahead of the ball here and say that we don't want to wait till it gets removed and then say, oh no, now what do we do? So we want to have a plan in place so that we can have the ball rolling in case that gets removed ahead of what we think possibly the schedule is. So we know what we need to do, and we can hopefully have things going on so we can accommodate that.
And that's a DOT decision?
Yes, it is.
You meet a certain threshold, it's done?
That is them. Yeah, it's all on them, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question on the park cover concept and the ribbon walkway concept. So on the park cover, you're talking about lowering Omaha. Is the same thing going to happen with the ribbon walkway concept?
The ribbon walkway would actually be more of a pedestrian overpass. There might be just a slight lowering, like even very minimal lowering of Omaha Street, but it's really getting the pedestrians up and over. And one thing we worried about pedestrian bridges is people don't like to use them. They don't want to go up. They'll dash across the road if they have to. So that's why we like the kind of the park cover concept, because it really separates those pedestrians from the vehicles and doesn't provide any sort of opportunity for the mixing. So, if you're walking down 6th Street, you just go straight up and over this little archway, and there's no chance of you crossing Omaha Street at that location, because Omaha Street will be, significantly lower. So unless you want to jump down a retaining wall and run across the road and try to scale a retaining wall on the other side. Now, so we think that that's probably the best option overall for overall bike and ped flow and traffic flow. However, again, there's a lot of engineering questions that need to be answered. So that's just one of the concepts. So that's the next step of the study. Is it going to be, this park cover concept? Is it more of a traditional pedestrian bridge? Can we do some sort of pedestrian walkway underneath the roadway? Those are things that we'll be taking a look at in the next phase of the study.
So on the surveys that you did, what were the total amount of inputs?
Over 500 responses on the surveys.
Again, I can see why the park cover concept is more attractive, because it certainly is. And thank you for all the work and the staff for everything they did on this to bring this together, because this is definitely something needed to bring those two parts of our town together. The new civic center and everything that's happening with our business district downtown. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Haven.
Yeah, thank you for the very comprehensive report. I think Karen and Kelly kind of asked the questions that I was going to, so I don't have any other questions.
Mike Kwasny.
I would also like to thank you. I think it's a very good report that was put together. The biggest thing I have is the drainage. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that, because I'm sure the engineers will come up with something. I think they use this for animals sometimes in different parts of the world, where they had this covering over a highway, and it's kind of an interesting concept, and it looks great. And I think the public will really enjoy that park cover if we can accomplish that. The drainage along the creek, it's kind of interesting to think about that. So
yeah, we've talked to DOT, and they've run some preliminary, very rough profiles that show that you can lower Omaha Street to some extent and still achieve drainage to the creek bed. So we think it's doable, but again, that's just real high level, quick and dirty, back of a napkin sketching kind of stuff. So once we get into the next phase of this, that's when we'll really get down to the nitty gritty details.
I hope they figure it out, and it's a way that something can be accomplished with it, but that is the interesting part to me as I look at it. So
It'll be interesting for sure.
thank you for all you did for this.
Thank you very much.
I think it was well put together. So.
All right, any other questions, comments on the 6th Street study final report? If not, I'd look for a motion to approve the report. All right. Vince made the motion and Kelly seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, discussions items or staff items today?
Just one, Mr. Chair. I wanted to introduce Marty Gillies. He is our new urban planner with the current planning division. He replaces John Green that left us for Colorado. Marty comes to us from Ohio, and in the very near future, you'll be reading staff reports and project reports with Marty's name on it. Wanted you to put a name and a face together.
All right, welcome, Marty. Glad you could be here on a snowy morning in October. Welcome to South Dakota.
We are also accrediting Marty with the poor weather that he brought it with him, so.
Vicki, I had one thing to ask. So we're assigned to be a planning commission liaison to the city council every week. I apologize for not thinking about this earlier. Would it make sense to temporarily suspend that just to lower the numbers in a public meeting? Something to think about.
Definitely. I'll be visiting with Ken about that after this meeting, and we can certainly, that does make sense. We've been talking about that internally too,
Okay.
that we need to be going back towards limiting direct contact with the public, being respectful of the number of people in one room, and that's a valid comment, so we will be in touch with you.
I think all of us, I really enjoy going. I think that we all enjoy going and would be ready to provide input if needed, but, it's been a while since I've been called on. So,
It's a good conversation. Thank you for bringing that up.
anything else from the commission today? All right, I look for a motion to adjourn then. All right, Karen made the motion to adjourn. Vince seconded that motion. All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.